October 1943, Vickers-Armstrong Factory, Newcastle upon Tyne. British engineers unveiled their solution to one of the war's most pressing problems: how to destroy German Panthers and Tigers that were slaughtering Allied armor across Europe. They had created a self-propelled tank destroyer mounting the fearsome 17-pounder anti-tank gun. There was just one small detail that made everyone who saw it stop and stare. The gun was backwards. Not slightly offset, not angled to the side, completely backwards. The 17-pounder, all 3 meters of barrel, pointed toward the rear of the vehicle while the driver sat at the front facing forward. It looked like someone had assembled the thing the wrong way round at the factory. British Army officers who first saw the Archer thought there had been some terrible mistake. Surely this couldn't be intentional. Surely British engineers hadn't deliberately created a tank destroyer that appeared to be retreating from battle while firing. But they had. And before the war ended, British tank destroyer crews would come to prefer this backwards beast over every other self-propelled gun in the arsenal. This is the story of how Britain turned an engineering constraint into a tactical advantage and created one of the most effective tank killers of World War II by pointing the gun the wrong way. By 1943, Britain faced a problem that kept military planners awake at night. German armor had become nearly invulnerable to British tank guns. The Tiger 1I, introduced in late 1942, mounted 100 millimeters of frontal armor. The Panther, appearing in mid-1943, had 80 millimeters of sloped armor that effectively doubled its protection. British tanks, Cromwells and Churchills, carried 75-millimeter guns that couldn't penetrate these monsters at combat ranges. The 6-pounder anti-tank gun, which had been adequate against Panzer IIIs and IVs, bounced harmlessly off Tiger and Panther armor. British tank crews were dying. At the Battle of Vickers-Armstrong in June 1944, a single Tiger commanded by Michael Whitman destroyed 14 British tanks and 15 other vehicles in 15 minutes. This wasn't an anomaly. It was the new reality. The solution existed: the 17-pounder anti-tank gun. Introduced in 1943, the Ordnance quick-firing 17-pounder was a 76.2-millimeter gun that could punch through 140 millimeters of armor at 1,000 yards. With armor-piercing discarding sabot APDS ammunition introduced in 1944, it could penetrate 208 millimeters at the same range. This was the weapon that would restore Britain's armor parity. It could kill Tigers. It could kill Panthers. It could kill anything Germany fielded. But there was a problem. The 17-pounder was massive. The gun itself weighed 3,000 pounds. It measured 3 meters long, barrel and breech. The recoil forces were enormous, requiring a recoil system that added another 500 pounds. Mounting this substantial weapon on a vehicle required substantial space, structural reinforcement, and careful weight distribution. Britain tried mounting it on the Sherman, creating the Sherman Firefly. That worked, but Fireflies were slow to produce because American-built Shermans had to be completely rebuilt. Britain tried designing new tank chassis around the 17-pounder. But new designs took years to develop, and Germany was advancing tank technology faster than Britain could respond. The 17-pounder was simply too large to mount conventionally on available British tank chassis without creating a vehicle so top-heavy that it would be uncontrollable or so tall that it would be an easy target. Meanwhile, Tigers and Panthers were destroying British armor formations across Italy and in preparation for the coming invasion of France. Britain needed a 17-pounder armed tank destroyer fast, and they needed hundreds of them. The chassis existed: the Valentine infantry tank. By 1943, the Valentine was obsolete as a battle tank. Its 2-pounder gun, later upgraded to 6-pounder, couldn't threaten modern German armor. But thousands had been produced. The manufacturing infrastructure existed in Canada and Britain, and the chassis was reliable and available. The Valentine offered key advantages: low profile, 2.27 meters high, proven mechanical reliability, adequate armor protection, 60 millimeters frontal, and immediate production capacity. British tank destroyer units could receive Valentines immediately if a solution could be found. The challenge that forced innovation: the 17-pounder was simply too large to mount conventionally on the Valentine chassis. A forward-facing turret would make the vehicle unacceptably tall, over 3 meters, and dangerously front-heavy. The recoil forces would destabilize the platform. Traverse limitations would be severe. The Vickers-Armstrong designers had a radical idea. What if they mounted the 17-pounder at the rear of the vehicle, but facing backwards? The benefits were immediate. Overall length kept to 6.68 meters, comparable to conventional designs. Weight distribution balanced with engine in middle, gun at rear. Profile maintained at just 2.25 meters height, lower than a Sherman. Gun crew positioned in enlarged rear fighting compartment. Driver remained in the front position. No turret required, reducing weight and complexity. Compared to conventional self-propelled guns like the M100, 2.57 meters high, or German Marder 3, 2.48 meters high, the Archer would be significantly lower, making concealment easier. Development began in early 1943. Vickers built the first prototype in March 1943 at Newcastle. Testing at Littleworth Proving Grounds in Dorset through summer 1943 validated the concept. The 17-pounder performed exactly as expected, 942 meters per second muzzle velocity with standard armor piercing, 1,204 meters per second with APDS rounds. Penetration exceeded 140 millimeters at 1,000 yards, enough to defeat any German tank. But nobody could get past that backwards gun. First production Archers rolled out of Vickers factories in March 1944.
Public sightings generated immediate confusion. People were used to seeing self-propelled guns with barrels pointing forward over the driver's head, not backwards toward empty space behind the vehicle. Soldiers stationed near training grounds stopped, pointed, and questioned what they were seeing. Was it broken? Had the gun been installed wrong? Was this some kind of training mock-up? British Army crews assigned to the Archer in spring 1944 shared the skepticism. These were experienced Royal Artillery anti-tank gunners who had trained on conventional towed 17-pounders and on self-propelled guns like the M10 Wolverine. They understood their profession. You drive toward the enemy, you point your gun at the enemy, you fire at the enemy. And now they were being asked to crew a vehicle that appeared to be pointing the wrong way. Training began at the Royal Armoured Corps Gunnery School at Lulworth in April 1944. Initial instruction challenged every assumption about tank destroyer employment. Crews had to unlearn everything they thought they knew about self-propelled gun operations. The driver operated with the gun pointed behind him, a disconcerting reversal of normal vehicle weapon orientation. The gun crew worked in a rear-facing fighting compartment. Forward motion meant the gun faced backwards. Retreat meant the gun faced forwards. Exactly opposite to conventional doctrine. The entire tactical doctrine had to be reimagined. But something interesting happened during training. Instructors didn't just teach the how. They explained the why, the tactical rationale, the engagement doctrine, the survival advantages. Slowly, crew after crew began to understand this wasn't a design mistake. This was tactical innovation. The British Army gave it a name, shoot and scoot doctrine, and it would transform the way Britain employed tank destroyers. Here is how it worked. Approach phase. The Archer approached its firing position, typically hull down behind terrain, hedgerows, or rubble, driving forward like any vehicle, but instead of stopping and traversing the gun toward the expected enemy approach, the Archer drove into position already aligned. The 17-pounder was already pointed toward the expected threat direction, because it pointed backwards. The vehicle was already oriented for immediate escape, because the driver faced the escape route. Concealment phase. The Archer's low profile, just 2.25 meters high, made concealment easier than with conventional self-propelled guns like the M10, 2.57 meters, or German Marder, 2.48 meters. Crews prepared the gun, loaded armor-piercing or APDS rounds, set range estimation, confirmed traverse limits, 45 degrees left or right of center line, and waited. Engagement phase. Enemy armor appeared. Panthers, Tigers, Panzer IVs. The Archer fired. The 17-pounder's muzzle velocity, 942 meters per second with standard AP, 1,204 meters per second with APDS, delivered devastating kinetic energy. At 1,000 yards, the gun could punch through 140 millimeters of armor with standard ammunition, 208 millimeters with APDS. At that range, the 17-pounder could penetrate Panther frontal armor, 80 millimeter effective thickness, yes. Tiger 1 frontal armor, 100 millimeters, yes. Tiger 1 side armor, 80 millimeters, absolutely. Panzer IV at any angle, without question. Even the Tiger II, King Tiger, with 150mm frontal armor, vulnerable at closer ranges. Withdrawal phase, the key advantage. But here is where the Archer's design proved brilliant. The moment the gun fired, the loader began reloading, but simultaneously, the driver already had the vehicle in gear, facing the escape route, ready to move. The engine engaged immediately. The vehicle moved at full speed, 20 miles per hour, not backward in vulnerable reverse, but forward at maximum velocity. The Archer raced away at full speed, already facing the escape route. No turning required, no vulnerable moment. Within seconds, the Archer relocated 200-300 yards, repositioned behind new concealment, and was ready to fire again. The entire shoot-and-scoot cycle took 30 to 45 seconds. Compare this to the tactical reality of a conventional self-propelled gun. After firing, a conventional self-propelled gun had to complete reload, 10 to 15 seconds, begin backing up in reverse, slowly, 5 to 10 miles per hour maximum, vulnerable, or turn around, exposing thin side armor, extremely vulnerable, or stay in position and fire again, suicidal against return fire. Each second spent stationary or moving slowly was a second vulnerable to counter-battery fire, air attack, or enemy tank guns. The Archer eliminated those dangerous seconds. British crews soon learned to exploit the strengths. Contemporary accounts from the 65th Anti-Tank Regiment, later 93rd Anti-Tank Regiment, describe developing tactics around the Archer's unique capabilities. Initial constraints, limited gun traverse, open-top vulnerability, and slower cross-country speed than tanks were acknowledged, but practical benefits dominated crew assessments. More importantly, post-war surveys and historical accounts indicate that many British tank destroyer crews preferred the Archer to the M10 Wolverine or the towed 17-pounder. Why? Mobility meant survival, and survival meant killing more enemy tanks. The Archer had real limitations. Gun traverse limited to 45 degrees left to right, 90-degree total arc. Open-top fighting compartment vulnerable to artillery airbursts and infantry attacks. Forward speed limited to 20 miles per hour, reverse speed only 7 miles per hour. Cross-country mobility inferior to tracked tanks. Only 3 crew in the fighting compartment, but many British tank destroyer crews favored their Archer over the M10 Wolverine or the towed 17-pounder. The better tactics the Archer presented through shoot-and-scoot doctrine outweighed the drawbacks. Archer crews borrowed camouflage techniques from German tank hunters, aggressive use of natural concealment, firing from unexpected angles, disappearing before counterfire arrived. They had reason to disguise their capability from the enemy. German doctrine prioritized destroying enemy self-propelled guns quickly. Tank commanders knew that SPGs like the M10 carried high-velocity guns that could threaten even heavy armor. Archer crews believed that if Germans identified them, they would draw concentrated fire. Deception bought precious seconds, and seconds determined who lived and who died. Production ran from March 1944 to May 1945. Total production, 655 Archers built by Vickers-Armstrong.
First units were issued in October 1944. The 65th Anti-Tank Regiment Royal Artillery received 24 Archers, replacing their towed 17-pounders. They deployed to Northwest Europe, specifically to the Netherlands, in October 1944. They arrived just after Operation Market Garden's costly failure at Arnhem. The strategic situation was grim. German forces had stabilized defensive lines. The Allies faced fortified positions, determined counterattacks, and increasingly desperate German armored operations. Archers were assigned to Royal Artillery anti-tank regiments, not to armored cavalry units. These were methodical, defensive specialists, not fast-moving exploiters. They supported infantry divisions during deliberate advances, provided mobile anti-armor capability for river crossings, and established defensive screens during consolidation phases. General Bernard Montgomery called veritable some of the heaviest fighting of the whole campaign. British and Canadian forces attacked through the Reichswald forest toward the Rhine. Casualties exceeded 15,000. German forces fought with fanatical determination, knowing they were defending the German homeland. The terrain suited the Archer. Dense forest, small villages, limited visibility, short engagement ranges. Heavy mud restricted mobility, but the Archer's Valentine chassis, designed for infantry support, handled conditions better than faster but less reliable vehicles. British trials conducted in 1944 to 45 against captured German armor provided definitive data. Against a captured Panther Aust G, chassis number 121572, captured near Cleve, February 1945. Side armor penetrated from 1,000 yards at 30-degree obliquity. Hull penetrated from 1,200 yards perpendicular impact.
Mantle penetrated from 800 yards. Against a Tiger I, based on intelligence reports from December 1944, February 1945, Mantle penetrated at 1,000 yards with APDS. Side armor penetrated at all combat ranges. Frontal armor vulnerable to APDS rounds under 1,500 yards. Against Tiger II, King Tiger variants encountered from January 1945. Mantle vulnerable at 600 to 800 yards with APDS. Side armor penetrated at all ranges. Improved APDS performance noted in March 1945 trials. What this meant for Archer crews was simple. They could threaten any German tank on the battlefield. Panthers, Tigers, Tiger IIs, Jagd Panthers, even the rare Jagd Tigers, all were vulnerable to the 17-pounder's kinetic energy, especially with APDS ammunition. Archer batteries positioned themselves along likely German counterattack routes. When German armor developed attacks, they often didn't see the low-profile Archers concealed in rubble, tree lines, or behind terrain features. The first the Germans knew was the impact, a 17-pounder APDS round traveling at 1,204 meters per second, punching through armor like paper, creating catastrophic internal damage from spalling and secondary explosions. Then, the Archer was gone. Racing forward, away from the disabled German tank, relocating, repositioning. German forces attempted to locate the firing position, but by the time they oriented their guns, the Archer had vanished. Contemporary combat accounts. The 93rd Anti-Tank Regiment Royal Artillery operating with 30 Corps during Operation Veritable, recorded in February 1945, sharp-eyed Archer crews detecting a Panther at 900 yards through morning fog, engaging and disabling the vehicle before it could locate our position. The specific outcome was not recorded, only that the doctrine was executed correctly: vigilance, preparation, engagement, withdrawal. This became the pattern. The Rhine crossing at Wessel, larger in scale than D-Day in terms of troops involved, required massive anti-armor protection for vulnerable bridgehead positions. Archers from the 65th and 93rd Anti-Tank Regiments positioned themselves near crossing sites. Their role was perfect for Archer doctrine: defend static positions, engage enemy armor attempting to destroy bridges or disrupt crossings, maintain engagement capability even during tactical withdrawal if German counterattacks penetrated defensive lines. The crossings succeeded. British and Canadian forces established bridgeheads and continued advancing into Germany. Archer units advanced with them, providing mobile anti-armor capability through contested German territory. Other theaters. Limited numbers of Archers deployed to Italy with British forces from January 1945, serving with 78th Infantry Division. The mountainous Italian terrain presented different challenges: steep roads, limited maneuver space, but the Archer's low profile remained advantageous in the vertical terrain. The exact combat record of the Archer remains frustratingly incomplete. Compare this to the Sherman Firefly, which has documented kill counts from specific engagements, or the German Jagd Panther, whose combat record includes famous individual actions. The Archer's kill counts have not been found in available documentation from British archives. This absence does not indicate ineffectiveness. British anti-tank regiments maintain different record-keeping standards than armored units. Defensive engagements, where Archer excelled, generated less detailed after-action reports than offensive tank battles. The Archer entered service in October 1944 and served until May 1945, just 7 months of combat operations during the war's final chaotic phase when record-keeping degraded. What can be stated? Crews preferred the Archer. This preference was not mandated or propaganda. It came from experienced Royal Artillery gunners who understood the vulnerability of towed guns and the limitations of conventional self-propelled guns. Mobility meant survival. When given the choice, many crews wanted the Archer despite its unconventional design. The verdict, the unconventional design that initially seemed strange, had proven itself in combat. The backwards gun that seemed like a mistake was actually tactical innovation, enabling shoot-and-scoot tactics no conventional self-propelled gun could match as effectively. The end of the war in May 1945 could have been the end of the Archer's story. Military technology moves quickly. Wartime expedience gets retired. Advanced designs replace stopgaps. The Archer, built on an obsolete Valentine chassis mounting a gun backwards, should have been scrapped immediately. But it continued. The Archer remained in British Army service not just months, but years, into the early 1950s, a full 6 years after the war ended. This longevity is remarkable and revealing. Why this matters? Britain kept the Archer in service longer than more conventional self-propelled guns. The M10 Wolverine was retired shortly after the war. More modern designs became available, but the Archer stayed. Why? Because it worked. Though losses were heavy for both sides, these vehicles were still fighting in 1949, 4 years after they first appeared, using the same backwards gun design that had seen so wrong in 1943. This post-war service represents vindication. Armed forces keep what works and discard what doesn't. Britain's choice to retain the Archer into the 1950s, Egypt's choice to purchase 80 of them, Israel's choice to use captured examples. These weren't made out of nostalgia or necessity. Better options existed. The American M36 Jackson with a 90mm gun, British Centurion tanks entering service, newer self-propelled gun designs. Britain kept the Archer because its specific capabilities, low profile, powerful gun, shoot-and-scoot doctrine, remained relevant even after the war ended. There is no documented evidence that German forces specifically identified the Archer as a distinct threat or developed specific countermeasures targeting it. Research through available German tactical documents and intelligence reports has found no enemy perspective specifically about the backwards British tank destroyer. This absence is explained by several factors. The Archer entered service in October 1944, giving German forces only 7 months of exposure before the war ended. Production numbers, 655 total, were small compared to thousands of Shermans, hundreds of M10s and other Allied vehicles flooding into Europe. The Archer was employed in defensive and ambush roles where engagements were brief. Effective shoot-and-scoot tactics meant German forces often couldn't identify what had fired at them before the Archer relocated. By late 1944, German intelligence capabilities were severely degraded. Record-keeping was fragmentary. Survival took priority over detailed tactical analysis. German forces respected and feared the 17-pounder gun itself. Tactical instructions from late 1944 warns German tank crews about the British 76mm gun, their designation for the 17-pounder, and instructed commanders to engage vehicles carrying this weapon immediately due to its armored penetration capability. German recognition manuals from 1944-1945 identified the Sherman Firefly by its longer barrel, proving Germans actively watched for 17-pounder armed vehicles and prioritized destroying them. British forces adopted camouflage techniques specifically to disguise Firefly and Archer capabilities from German observers. This suggests Germans would prioritize targeting vehicles with the 17-pounder if they could identify them. Whether Germans knew about the backwards gun design was irrelevant. The 17-pounder was demonstrably feared. The Archer delivered that gun's killing power. The effect was the same. German armor was vulnerable, and the Archer's shoot-and-scoot tactics made it locating it and destroying it extremely difficult. Technological superiority had been negated, and that's what mattered tactically. The technical specifications tell part of the story. Weight, 14.5 tons, lighter than M10 at 29.6 tons. Engine, GMC 6004 6-cylinder diesel, 192 horsepower. Transmission, special feature, driver faced forward, gun faced rear, enabling forward escape at full speed. Operational range, 225 kilometers. Armor protection, front, 60 millimeters. Sides, 20 millimeters. Rear, 20 millimeters. Top, open, vulnerable to airburst artillery. Light protection acknowledged, but role was ambush and mobility, not sustained firefights. Main armament, Ordnance QF 17-pounder, 72.6 millimeters. 39 rounds carried. Muzzle velocity, 942 meters per second APCBC, 1204 meters per second APDS. Penetration, 140 millimeters at 1,000 yards APCBC, 208 millimeters APDS. Traverse, 45 degrees left and right of centerline, 90-degree total arc. Elevation range, -7.5 to +15 degrees. Crew, 4. Driver, commander or gunner. Loader, radial operator. Dimensions, length 6.68 meters including the gun. Width 2.76 meters. Height 2.25 meters. Profile comparison, lower than M10, 2.57 meters. M36, 2.71 meters. Marder 3, 2.48 meters. These numbers matter because they define what the Archer could and could not do. The Archer was not a fast cavalry vehicle for pursuit operations, not a heavy breakthrough tank destroyer, not a frontline brawler designed for sustained combat. The Archer was a defensive or ambush specialist, optimized for shoot-and-scoot engagements, a platform delivering 17-pounder killing power at minimal profile, its unique capability, forward escape at full speed immediately after firing, something no conventional self-propelled gun could match, a 17-pounder APDS round traveling at 1,204 meters per second carrying devastating kinetic energy punched through Panther or Tiger armor before the German crew even knew they were under fire. By the time German forces located the firing position, the Archer was gone, racing away at full speed, already facing its escape route, disappearing into the landscape before counterfire could be brought to bear. The backwards gun that looked so wrong had just demonstrated why it was tactically right. British engineers in 1943 faced an impossible problem: mount the enormous 17-pounder gun on the small Valentine chassis without creating an uncontrollable vehicle that would be too tall, too front-heavy, or structurally unsound. They found a solution that made everyone think they had made a mistake: mount the gun backwards. British tank destroyer crews in 1944 faced an impossible vehicle. They had to learn to fight with a weapon pointed the wrong way, develop tactics contradicting established doctrine, and trust an unconventional design in situations where mistakes meant death. They learned, adapted, and came to prefer it over conventional alternatives. British military planners in the post-war years faced surplus equipment and tight budgets. They had to decide what to keep and what to scrap. They kept the Archer in service into the 1950s, longer than many more conventional vehicles. The verdict: the backwards gun that everyone said was wrong turned out to be right. The unconventional design that defied expectations proved effective in combat. The stopgap measure designed as a temporary expedient outlasted more sophisticated alternatives and earned adoption by foreign militaries years after the war ended. Sometimes the best way forward is to point your gun backwards and trust that tactical innovation matters more than conventional appearance. The crews of the 655 Archers built during the Second World War proved exactly that. One engagement and one rapid forward escape at a time, through the forests of Germany, the rubble of Dutch towns, and the crossing points of the Rhine, they took an impossible design, made it work, and preferred it to everything else. That is the real story of Britain's backwards tank destroyer, the Archer, the vehicle that seemed wrong but fought right, that appeared to retreat while it advanced, that proved unconventional solutions can be superior solutions when paired with innovative tactics and crews willing to adapt. The Germans laughed at the backwards British tank, until Archer crews destroyed their Panthers in reverse and disappeared before the Germans could react. Then they stopped laughing.